listeners. Welcome to the 54th lecture in this NPTEL course on 20th century poetry. We have been discussing the life and work of Sylvia Plath, and in the previous lecture, I introduced a tradition of American poetry called the American Family Elegy. This is the context in which some of Sylvia Plath's most powerful poems, those elegies written in memory of her father, can be best understood. I began this series of 5 poems by reading through full Fathom 5. And I will now mention some key points, some key phrases and words from that poem before moving on. The speaker of this poem describes that she is looking with ceaseless, loving eyes. Despite such an expression, she admits that she cannot look much. She cannot really see the entirety of this dead but also decomposing but not yet fully decomposed body of her father that is floating, that is spread like some sort of amphibious forest or undergrowth that is spreading all across the ocean. She can only half believe the rumors of her father's demise because he rises and falls with the tide, surfacing unpredictably. His hair, the hair of this person is like a dragnet. It's like a net that catches things, small things in its tangles. And through this hair, this dead father, the figure of this dead father resembles an all-encompassing text, a vast system of signifiers. I mentioned how in earlier elegies, the discourse of the dead is reconstructed. The poet remembers in order to rebuild an accurate picture of how the person was before they died. And as the poet does that, the poet is brought to a reconciliation, is brought to an acceptance that death is final in some ways, but despite the finality of death, the memory or the individual who has passed away continues to live on in some way. That is how the traditional elegy works. But here, we are not reading a traditional elegy, and in fact, we see how that system does not work at all. The dead father's discourse and body and memory are all described as being inscrutable. And from the waist down, the speaker mentions that he is one labyrinthine tangle. And this is one of those things that the speaker is unable to see despite having a ceaseless, loving gaze. She's unable to see something which is probably the wound that she has sensed, but there is something that may be like a wound, but it is below the waist in terms of the anatomy of this dead body. And the reader is led to infer that the poet is unable to see this section of the corpse's anatomy because of what the speaker suspects she would find if she were to see. And it might be that it contains the twin secrets of her birth and his death. So the idea of castration and the idea of sexuality are both brought together in this inability of the speaker to see certain things. The speaker seems to fear discovering that her birth led to his death. And this is the first instance where the poet will give expression to the idea that she herself is responsible for having produced this loss. And why is that? Because of her excessive love for her father. The speaker averts her gaze as soon as she begins to notice that her gaze is moving towards that unseeable area, as if she's worried, as if she's filled with guilt that she may be implicated in the obscure story of his wounding. She has sensed that there is a wound, there is a strange injury, but she's unable to figure out or decide or find out what is the nature and what is the type of injury. A wounding whose cause remains unclear, but it nonetheless remains connected to her. The poem ends with the words that the thick air is murderous and that the speaker, that she would breathe water. The air is murderous and breathing water. Two things are happening. The air is murderous. With these words, the poet suggests that it is she herself who is responsible. And she is responsible for her father's death. And this is the truth. This is the difficult, nightmarish thought that she is unable to accept. And she says she would breathe water because this is the only punishment. Her own death, her own existence must cease if she is to receive the just desert for the action that she has committed. This line that the grief and mourning of a speaker translates into a wish for the speaker's own death. This also has a history, a genealogy in literary history, and we are reminded of one particular moment. This is from the poem Adonais, in which Shelley writes about John Keats. The line is, "No more let life divide what death can join together." This line here means obviously that as the speaker is filled with such impossible longing, the only thing the speaker can do to elevate that in some way is to join this dead person in whatever space they are, that is through their own death. Plath's poem comes very close to echoing this sentiment from Shelley's. But this is only the earliest stage in Plath's own writing about her father, and we can take away a few things while we move on from this poem. Full Fathom 5 suggests the poet Sylvia Plath, describes the poet Sylvia Plath's first exploration of the contradictory set of emotions and impulses which surround the memory of her father, the short life and death of her father, and her own position, her own life in response to it, her life while he was alive, her life after his death, and her continued inspiration and writing as a poet. This is a poem which ends with the speaker blaming herself and struggling to find just punishment or the adequate compensation, the adequate treatment that she would deserve if it were known for certain to herself as well as to others that it was through her excessive love that she had produced this irreversible loss, the death of her father. That is what happens in Full Fathom 5. Let us now move on to the second of 5 poems. I hope we can read some of these at least, if not all of them. The second poem in this series is Electra on Azalea Path. This is how Sylvia Plath writes. The day you died, I went into the dirt, into the lightless hibernaculum, where bees striped black and gold sleep out the blizzard, like hieratic stones, and the ground is hard. It was good for 20 years, that wintering, as if you never existed, as if I came godfathered into the world from my mother's belly. Her white bed wore the stain of divinity. I had nothing to do with guilt or anything when I wormed back under my mother's heart. Small as a doll in my dress of innocence, I lay dreaming your epic, image by image. Nobody died or withered on that stage. I lay dreaming your epic, image by image. Nobody died or withered on that stage. Everything took place in a durable whiteness. The day I woke on Churchyard Hill. I found your name, I found your bones and all, enlisted in a cramped necropolis, your speckled stone askew by an iron fence. In this charity ward, this poorhouse, where the dead crowd foot to foot, head to head, no flower breaks the soil. This is Azalea Path. A field of burdock opens to the south. 6 feet of yellow grave will cover you. The artificial red sage does not stir in the basket of plastic evergreens they put at the headstone next to yours, nor does it rot, although the rains dissolve a bloody dye. The ersatz petals they drip red. Another kind of redness bothers me. The day your slack sail drank my sister's breath, the flat sea purple like that evil cloth my mother unrolled at your last homecoming. I borrow the stilts of an old tragedy. The truth is, one late October at my birth cry, a scorpion stung its head, an ill-starred thing. My mother dreamed you face down in the sea. The stony actors poise and pause for breath. I brought my love to bear, and then you died. It was the gangrene ate you to the bone, my mother said. You died like any man. How shall I age into that state of mind? I am the ghost of an infamous suicide, my own blue razor rusting in my throat. Oh, pardon the one who knocks for pardon at your gate, father, your hound bitch, daughter, friend. It was my love that did us both to death. Okay, the first thing to note about this poem, and I will gloss over some key phrases soon, but the first thing to note about it is the title. The Azalea path is clear enough. It refers to a particular pathway that leads up to the grave, the gravestone, the site where Otto Plath was buried. But Electra, where does that word come from? The word originates in Greek myth and specifically made famous and made well known to readers of literature through the tragic cycle of Greek plays by Aeschylus. The name of the play is the Orestia, and it describes how in Greek myth the character Electra, who is the daughter of Agamemnon, plots with Orestes to avenge her father's murder by Clytemnestra. So the Electra word is connecting to Greek tragedy, to literature, to stories of tragic events, to stories of relationships between dead fathers and their daughters, and how these daughters react, what they do in response to their father's untimely deaths. This is what the word Electra is doing. The word Electra was utilized by another very sensitive and perceptive reader of literature, Sigmund Freud. Sigmund Freud used this word, the character from Aeschylus's play, the Orestia, used the name of Electra to describe certain psychological phenomena. Psychological phenomena that affects all human beings, according to Freud. There was something archetypal, something stereotypical, but also patriarchal, that assumes the centrality of the phallus. So, according to Sigmund Freud, children go through a similar process of transition from infancy to childhood. There's a particular time in that stage when the child's body is not yet fully developed and the infant is in a perfectly organic relationship with the body of the mother. At some point when the child grows older, the child develops a notion of their own body as separate. This is a time when, for Sigmund Freud, male children develop an attachment to the body of the mother and hostility towards the body of the father. Girl children, according to Freud, develop a slightly different process of transition, because initially they are attracted, like the male child, to the body of the mother, but they soon realize that they share with the body of the mother a lack, the lack of the phallus. This is something that Freud also called penis envy. For all of these reasons, the idea of the Electra complex is almost entirely invalidated today. It has been discredited, and it was also not something that Freud stuck to very strongly. Nonetheless, the history of the Electra complex shows that there is something very powerful about the story in Greek myth, as well as the way that story was made popular and powerful in Greek tragedy, which has inspired several 20th century writers and thinkers. Plath is very aware of this history, which is why she titles her poem Electra on Azalea path. The reference to Electra is, of course, ironic, because Plath doesn't believe really in such an idea or such an archetypal form of human identity. Individuals are individuals. They are not governed by these theories. Nonetheless, the word Electra will remind us of something. It will connect to several key phrases in the poem. The poem is concerned with the transition from innocence to experience. It is describing quite literally the time when the speaker learned that her father had died at a very early stage in her life, and at some point she became conscious of the absence of her father as itself a defining presence, a defining force, a phenomena that exerted an influence, inspired her poetry. And she is trying to make sense of what kind of a force or what kind of a presence that is. A key image in this poem is that of the speaker having learned, having become conscious in adolescence or adulthood that her father's grave exists, that her father is not a real presence, visits her father's grave site and sees artificial flowers kept there, and the rain washing off the paint or the color from these flowers. And the expression that's used in the English language when colors leak when washing, sometimes when we buy clothes that are dyed in a very bright blue, for instance, indigo dye, and it is advised that one should be careful while washing these clothes with light colored clothes, because the language that's used is the color might bleed. Bleeding is a very powerful verb for this poem, because the poet describes the color red dripping from these flowers like blood, and this is part of the poet's slowly increasing violent imagery. The word ersatz has double meaning, because flowers are both symbols for the deceased, but also these are not real flowers. So the plastic flowers are symbols or substitutions for real flowers. Earlier elegies from Spenser in his poem Astrophel, to Felicity Hemans in her poem To the Memory of the Dead, had accepted flowers as substitutes for the recently deceased person. Here, that tradition is mocked quite savagely, quite strongly, and quite violently. The speaker of Plath's poem says that she borrows the stilts of an old tragedy. Which is the tragedy? Very obviously, the title gives us a clue. The tragedy of Electra avenging her father's death. And why borrowing? What exactly is the nature of this borrowing? The stilts of an old tragedy. Stilts are some sort of an elevated platform. The poet says that she borrows the stilts because she is telling her story or attempting to find her story by standing on top of another story. Does the myth explain what happened? In other words, does the story of Electra and Agamemnon explain to the poet what happened in the case of Otto Plath and Sylvia Plath? Or is the myth an excuse, a veil to disguise the fact that the speaker is struggling to make sense of the death she is mourning? It is the latter. The myth fails to provide the explanation that the poet seeks. And we know that is the case because the poet gives two very different kinds of explanations. The first is, the truth is, my mother dreamed you face down in the sea. So the first possible explanation for the death of Plath's father, or the first possible individual who can be blamed for Otto Plath's death, is Plath's own mother. And this explanation is not very plausible, which is why the speaker moves on very quickly. Just to take a brief detour into the biographical context, Otto Plath's, the cause of Otto Plath's death was an advanced case of diabetes, which led to an infection in his foot. Plath was misdiagnosed. It was treated not as diabetes but as a form of cancer. And Plath also ignored it and decided not to get a second opinion. Otto Plath, by the time it got really bad, it was too late. It was discovered that gangrene had set in. And the gangrene had advanced to such a point that amputation was the only option. And shortly after this amputation, Otto Plath died. So this is the technical, the factual reason for the death of Otto Plath. Neither his wife nor his daughter can be blamed. Nonetheless, the daughter writes a poem in which the speaker declares that she is the ghost of an infamous suicide, my own blue razor rusting in my throat. Now, this is a very horrific, painful image to even contemplate, but it's also a very telling image. The word blue is used for the razor. Blue is directly connected to gangrene, which technically speaking is the interruption of blood supply and the generation of dead tissue in any part of the human body. Symptoms of gangrene include change in the color of skin to shades of blue and gray, which darken as the gangrene gets worse. So when the poet asks us to imagine that there's a blue razor that's rusting in her throat, she is describing something of what might have happened when Otto Plath's leg was discovered to be infected by gangrene. But she's also using an image that is unprecedented, horrific, and almost unbearably violent. The image of a blue razor rusting in her throat. This is a kind of violence that the poet feels that she deserves for having contemplated or having wanted something. And again, what is that thing for which the poet is punishing herself? She's punishing herself for consciously or unconsciously having produced, having brought about through her excessive love, the death of her father. She calls herself the ghost of an infamous suicide, meaning obviously that she has survived. What has she survived exactly? The attempted suicide, which is the punishment for which crime? In either case, Plath is the survivor, and it makes things even more complicated, as if she is looking for closure in the process of grieving. Uh, we will move on, since we are pressed for time, to another poem, the third in the series. This one is titled The Colossus. All three of them were published in Plath's first book length volume, which was titled The Colossus. This is how the Colossus reads: I shall never get you put together entirely, pieced, glued, and properly jointed. Mule bray, pig grunt, and body cackles proceed from your great lips. It's worse than a barnyard. Perhaps you consider yourself an oracle, mouthpiece of the dead, or of some god or other. 30 years now I have labored to dredge the silt from your throat. I am none the wiser. Scaling little ladders with glue pots and pails of Lysol, I crawl like an ant in mourning over the weedy acres of your brow, to mend the immense skull plates and clear the bald white tumuli of your eyes. A blue sky out of the Orestia arches above us. O Father, all by yourself, you are pithy and historical as the Roman Forum. I open my lunch on a hill of black cypress. Your fluted bones and acanthine hair are littered in their old anarchy to the horizon line. It would take more than a lightning stroke to create such a ruin. Nights I squat in the cornucopia of your left ear, out of the wind, counting the red stars and those of plum color. The sun rises under the pillar of your tongue. My hours are married to shadow. No longer do I listen for the scrape of a keel on the blank stones of the landing. So this poem continues the narrative, and we can see some themes being repeated. The speaker declares how she has spent many years trying to get over something, trying to get closure, trying to get away from the ghost of this dead father. In the previous poem, the figure was 20 years. This time the figure is 30 years. So as Plath grows older, she struggles and she stages these struggles in different poems. The poem begins with a declaration of failure. The speaker declares that she shall never get you put together entirely. So the idea is that the figure of this dead father is scattered, broken down into many small pieces and spread out over a wide area. And the daughter, in her attempt to reconcile herself to this loss, which can only happen once she has pieced together exactly what it was that is missing, which is to say, she can reconcile herself to the loss of her father only once she decides for herself, she remembers and pieces together the memories of who her father in fact was. But that itself proves very difficult, if not impossible, to know who he was, because the different fragments of her experience, the times when he was alive and she happened to be in his presence, these were so disparate and fragmented and spread out over such a wide area that putting these fragments back to produce the original image of her father, that itself proves to be an extremely painstaking and almost impossible task. And despite all her efforts, the poet declares that she is none the wiser. Colossus, I'll briefly go over a few key phrases before wrapping up this poem and returning to Plath for one more lecture after this. But a few key ideas before we end. The definition of Colossus is that it refers to a person or thing of great size, influence, or ability. Uh, One instance of how this word can be used is if I were to describe Sylvia Plath as the creative colossus of the literary world. But the word colossus signifies both quality, inherent, as well as action that changes. So to be big and to wield one's bigness, as it were, at the same time is what makes someone merit this phrase that he or she is a colossus through acts of domination and control. So this is one thing to note, that in the wake of her father's death, uh, in her efforts to piece together an accurate, complete memory, including the unpleasant parts, uh, the memory or the figure of her father has come to uh, take the shape, and it has come to wield the force, the almost overwhelming force, the weight of a colossus. So the word colossus signifies a change in the speaker and the poet's perception of this memory. It is no longer a choice. It was a choice earlier. The speaker was trying to make sense of things, where at this point it is a colossus. So the weight is bearing down on the poet. The poet has no choice but to find a way to survive, to function. So that is a little bit on the kind of signaling that the word colossus does. One more word, and then I will stop. The speaker of this poem refers to uh, a blue sky out of the Oresteia, which arches above us. So the Oresteia has become a part of a little bit like the sky. So the archetype, the myth of the untimely death of the father and the daughter trying to avenge, trying to make sense of this untimely death of the father. There is no particular story that explains Sylvia Plath's relationship to Otto Plath. Rather, all of these stories combined, these myths, have become part of the sky under which Sylvia Plath conducts this process of reconciling herself to the truth and the memories of her father. There are quite a few things to talk about, so we will resume this discussion in the next lecture, but I will stop here for now. Thank you.